Hello, my name is Mackenzie, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to use the free photo editing website Fotor. And I'm just going to give you a quick basic of the website navigation, and then I'm going to explain how to edit for brightness and contrast, and then also how to explain how to edit exposure using shadows and highlights. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to open a web browser. I'm using Google Chrome, and then you're going to want to go to www.fotor.com. And I'm already here, and when you get to the home page, it gives you three options. You have Edit, Collage, and Design. We're going to be using Edit today because we're just editing one photo. So if you click on Edit, and once it finishes loading, it's going to open you to the photo editing basin, which is right here. And it's going to start you out with this preloaded photo. And I don't want to use this, so I'm going to go right over here to the right, and I'm just going to click this little X button and get rid of it. And now you can see that we have all the menus and stuff over here. This is our left-hand menu over here. And then this is the sub menu. Fotor won't let me do anything until I open a photo. So let's just open a photo right now. So click open, and then I'm going to find my picture that I saved. This is just a basic picture of ECL that I took the other night, and really nothing fancy. So my photo shows up over here. If I wanted to import photos, I could also use this option right here or this open button right here. Either one, they'll take you to the same thing. If I'd imported multiple photos, all the photos would show up over here. But since we only have one, it's just right here. So the first thing I see is that my photo is obviously rotated. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the rotate submenu, and we're just going to straighten it out so it looks the right way. And now that I'm looking at this, I can see that my photo is slightly crooked. So I'm going to use the straightening tool and just straighten it just a little bit. And you see that as soon as I move the scroller bar, these grids show up. And really all I'm looking for is I'm just looking to see if the lines in the bricks in the photograph are lining up with the grids from the straightening tool. And this looks pretty straight, it looks a lot better, so I'm going to leave this right here. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I want to crop it because there's just a lot of negative space right here in the front. So let's go to the crop tool, and let me just get my selection. And then once I have the selection done, you have to click apply. If you don't click apply, then Fotor will not save your crop. So make sure that you click the apply button. So now that our photo is all cropped and that it's straight, I'm going to go into some basic photo editing tools. So the first thing I want to go into is the basic. And this is going to give me four options. We have brightness, contrast, saturation, and sharpness. Brightness is pretty self-explanatory. The higher it is, the brighter it is. The lower it is, the darker it is. So this photo actually looks a little bright to me. So I'm going to bring the brightness down just a little bit. There's no real hard and fast rule when you're editing photos. It's really just whatever you like and what you're trying to accomplish. But good rules of thumb, you don't want it to be too bright where it looks washed out, and you don't want it to be too dark where you can't see anything. So just keep those simple rules in mind while we're going along editing these photos. So this looks good to me. I'm going to leave it right here at -12. So contrast is a little bit different. It's a little bit more confusing. Contrast is basically the scale of difference between black and white in your images. So high contrast images have a full range of tones from black to white with dark shadows and bright highlights. And I'll talk about shadows and highlights a little bit later in this video. So as you can see, if I take the contrast slider and I move it up, all the light areas become lighter and all the dark areas become darker. So you see all the lights are accentuated, but the rest of the photo is dark. Now, Low contrast, on the other hand, those images don't display a great deal of difference between lights and darks, so they kind of appear flat and dull. And just so I can show you guys, if we move the slider all the way down, it just starts to look really hazy. It really reminds me of just having like a thick fog over the photograph. So obviously we don't want our photo to look hazy, but we don't want our photo to look like this either, where you can't distinguish anything. The contrast in my photo is okay. I'm just gonna bring it up a little bit. Don't want it too much, but because if I bring it up too much, you really start to lose some of the details. So I'm gonna bring it up just a tiny bit, maybe around 10. That looks good to me. Saturation, I'm gonna come back to at the very end of this video. And sharpness, I'm not gonna worry about right now either. But basically sharpness, if you bring it up all the way, it's going to make your photo look more harsh and more stiff, where if you bring the sharpness all the way down, your photo is going to look more blurry and soft. I'm not really going for that effect this time, so I'm just going to leave it right in the middle, back at 0. So now that we fixed the brightness and contrast, I'm going to go into the fine tune menu right here. And this is going to bring up 3 options. We have exposure, highlights, and shadows. And exposure is basically the amount of light per unit area that's reaching your camera when you take the photo. So overexposed images have lots of bright spots that look really washed out, where underexposed images have very dark, muddy areas. My photo is a little underexposed. You can see over here in the trees and the bushes that they're just kind of muddied together. You can't really distinguish one thing from the other. So we can use our exposure tool to kind of fix that. So let me just show you, if we bring up the exposure all the way, the bright lights become really bright and everything becomes really washed out. If we bring it down all the way, it just becomes really dark and muddy and you can't really distinguish anything that's going on. So I'm going to bring my exposure up just a tiny bit, not too much because I don't want the whites to get washed out. So that's a good rule of thumb for exposure. I'm going to bring up the exposure just enough until my whites become washed out. Like this is a little too washed out. Still a little washed out, getting better. This is probably perfect. So now we're going to move on to highlights. Highlights are the bright white spots in an image. So if we bring up the highlights, we're going to make the bright spots brighter and the dark spots darker. And you notice that highlights and shadows are different. All of our other options, you kind of start out right in the middle, and you have an option to either go plus 100 or minus 100. Highlights and shadows both start at 0, and you can bring them up to 100 or you can bring them back down to 0. So if we bring up the highlights, it's just going to make all the bright spots really bright and just darken everything else. So obviously we don't want to do that because we're going to lose most of the photo. So I'm going to bring up the highlights just a tiny bit, because if we bring it up too much, it really just makes the photo go dark really quickly. So I'm going to keep it around 8 right now. And shadows, unfortunately this isn't the best photo to highlight shadows with. But basically shadows are just going to make the dark shadows more defined. So if we bring it up all the way, again, our whites are going to be too washed out. So we don't want to bring it up all the way, but I want to bring out my shadows. So again, the good rule of thumb is I'm going to bring up my shadows just enough where my whites aren't washed out. So this looks good to me. So now that I've finished really correcting my photo, I'm going to go back into my basics menu and I'm going to go back to saturation, because I think that this photo is going to look a lot better in black and white. So I'm just going to bring my saturation all the way down and I'm going to make the photo black and white. If you wanted to get a little bit more fancy, you can go into the curves option and really just play around with it. If you move around it, it's really just going to take you on a different spectrum of lights and exposure and highlights. So it's really not, it's very hard to play around with because there's no real correct spot. You really just have to play around with it. But I think that looks good right there. So I'm finished with this photo. I think it looks a lot better than the beginning. If we wanted to compare what the original photo looks like, if I go up here and I click and hold this button, I can see what the original photo looked like. So I can see how much better our photo looks now. So now that we're finished, I'm just going to click the save button, and I'm going to save this photo to my camera. Or to my computer. I'm going to save it as ECL Edit Final 2. I'm gonna save it as high quality just because it's right in the middle. I'm gonna click save to my computer and save. And now we're finished. So thank you for watching. I hope this video was helpful, and I really hope that it helps you improve your photo editing skills.